Hello humans, my name is Thunder, and I has thoughts. Today we're going to look at a video from the Daily Wire, which, as you know by now, is a very conservative, right-wing talking point channel, network, whatever you want to call it, headlined by the likes of Ben Shapiro. On your screen is Candace Owens, who is another conservative commentator who has her own show/podcast on the Daily Wire. And a few days ago, she devoted a segment to a child who was, according to her, sent home from school for the t-shirt he was wearing. So I thought we would look at what she has to say, the clip of the boy's speech before the school board, and then talk about what really happened, or at least what it's really about. So Candace, take it away.
I want to get to this young boy because it's so strange to think that we've jumped into a society where where children are getting into trouble for acknowledging reality.
So the first thing I want you to listen to how often she talks about reality, acknowledging reality, children getting in trouble for acknowledging reality. Wait till you see what kind of reality this boy was supposedly acknowledging.
And this really happened to this young boy. He was sent home from school. He is only 12 years old, and he was sent home because he wore a t-shirt that said, "There are only two genders." This is a Massachusetts middle school student. His name is Liam Morrison, and I want you to listen to him recounting this in his own words to the school board. Take a listen.
In the 7th, 10th grade at Nichols Middle School, I appreciate the opportunity to speak to you today. I never thought that the shirt I wore to school on March 21st would lead me to speak with you today.
Okay, I want to start off by saying this boy is 12. One of my humans is 11, another is 14. I understand what it's like for humans to be 12. It was brave and mature of him to want to give a speech before the school board about a thing of concern to him, and none of this is meant to be a critique of the boy himself, because the boy is learning from the adults around him. And hopefully this did become a teaching moment for him, although I have no idea what happened after he gave this speech because nobody wants to say. But I do want to make it very clear that I am not criticizing the boy. I am not criticizing the fact that he wanted to speak up, because children should be encouraged to speak up for what they believe in, but they also should be open to learning and to accepting guidance from the adults in their lives who know more than they do. And it's important that they are exposed to different viewpoints and different ways of thinking so that they can form opinions on their own and not only parrot the opinions of, say, their parents or a teacher or their peers. There needs to be input from all different areas and all different types of opinions so that they can learn to listen to what everyone has to say and learn what it means to have an open mind. Okay, take it away, kiddo.
On that Tuesday morning, I was taken out of gym class to sit down with two adults for what turned out to be a very uncomfortable talk. I was told that people were complaining about the words on my shirt, that my shirt was making some students feel unsafe. Yes, words on a shirt made people feel unsafe.
He seems surprised that words on a shirt could make someone feel unsafe, but what if those words were, "I have a gun," or "I don't like X group of people and I would like to see them all dead"? Of course words can make people feel unsafe.
Told me that I wasn't in trouble, but it sure felt like I was. I was told that I would need to remove my shirt before I could return to class. When I nicely told them that I didn't want to do that, they called my father. Thankfully, my dad supported my decisions and came to pick me up. What did my shirt say?
Before I let you hear what his shirt said, I do want to say, thankfully my father supported me and came to pick me up. The kid was not kicked out of school. His father chose to take him home. That is a completely different thing. He was not being sent home. He was asked to change his shirt. Here's what his shirt said.
5 simple words. There are only two genders. Nothing harmful, nothing threatening, just a statement I believe to be a fact.
Nothing harmful, nothing threatening, just a statement I believe to be a fact. Okay, you believe it to be a fact, but in the words of Daily Wire's friend, Ben Shapiro, facts don't care about your feelings. And you can't believe something to be a fact. It either is a fact or it isn't, right? There are only two genders may sound fairly neutral to this boy. It may sound like just expressing an opinion, like purple is the best color, or cats are better than dogs. Well, I believe that to be a fact, you understand, but, I'm not wearing a t-shirt that says cats are better than dogs to a dog pound. You get it, right? That would be an opinion, and that would be perfectly fine to have on your t-shirt, although it might be considered fighting words to some people or animals. However, there are only two genders. A is not a fact, and B could be considered threatening or not necessarily threatening in the sense of physical harm, but it does express an opinion that could be considered offensive or hateful or exclusionary. And I think exclusionary is the important word here. Let's hear what else he has to say.
I have been told that my shirt was targeting a protected class. Who is this protected class? Are their feelings more important than my rights?
Who is the protected class? Trans and non-binary students? Intersex students? Those are protected classes under most state laws, and I happen to know this was in Massachusetts, and I'm pretty sure Massachusetts has a state law about that. But if he was told that this was harmful to a protected class, then he should have said, what protected class is that? Can you explain that to me? I would like to understand why what my shirt says might be considered exclusionary or harmful so that I can do better in the future. But instead,
I don't complain when I see pride flags and diversity posters hung throughout the school. Do you know why? Because others have a right to their beliefs just as I do. Not one person, staff, or student told me that they were bothered by what I was wearing.
That's not true. Obviously, some staff told you that because you were called into the office for the staff to tell you that. Now, probably students didn't say anything because they didn't want to confront you. They didn't want to get into any trouble. They didn't want necessarily for you to get in trouble. So somebody probably went to their teacher and said, hey, this child is wearing a shirt that I think might be against school policy. It's making me feel uncomfortable. It's making me feel like he doesn't like me personally or as a group. And I'm wondering if there's anything that can be done about it. Or sensitive adults in the room might have seen the shirt and thought to themselves, well, that's not cool. Especially if it's the type of school where there are pride flags and other sorts of pro-LGBTQ symbolism hung about. He doesn't complain about it? Great. That means he has at least enough awareness to acknowledge that people have a right to their beliefs. That is true. And son, you do have a right to your beliefs. Nobody's taking your beliefs away from you. What we're asking is for you to consider that your beliefs may be hateful and for you to consider whether you want to be considered a hateful person.
Actually, just the opposite. Several kids told me that they supported my actions and that they wanted one too.
I bet they did.
I was told that the shirt was a disruption to learning. No one got up and stormed out of class. No one burst into tears. I'm sure I would have noticed if they had. I experienced disruptions to my learning every day. Kids acting out in class are a disruption, yet nothing is done. Why do the rules apply to one yet not another?
I don't doubt that there are other problems in the school. Most middle schools have problems with behavior, with classroom management. It's a thing. You've got a whole bunch of tweens and early teenagers crammed into a room for 6 hours a day, doing things they don't necessarily want to do. Yeah, there's going to be disruptions, but there can be more than one kind of disruption, and we can care about more than one thing at a time. So what we call this is whataboutism. And how do you know that nothing is done?
I feel like these adults were telling me that it wasn't okay for me to have an opposing view. Their arguments were weak, in my opinion. I didn't go to school that day to hurt.
This suggests to me that they didn't actually make an attempt to explain to him why what was on his shirt might be considered problematic. And they should have. It sounds like their arguments were weak. This is against school policy. Or they did explain it to him and he chose not to take in their words. I don't know which it is because he doesn't elaborate.
Feelings or cause trouble. I have learned a lot from this experience. I learned that a lot of other students share my view. I learned that adults don't always do the right thing or make the right decisions. I know that I have a right to wear a shirt with those 5 words. Even at 12 years old, I have my own political opinions, and I have a right to express those opinions.
You do have a right to express those opinions. That is 100% true. The First Amendment protects everyone, including children. However, there are Supreme Court cases about that very thing, and free speech does not always apply in school. There can be consequences applied if certain types of speech are exhibited and it is against school policy, and the school is allowed to have policies for the students and the teachers in their employ.
Even at school, this right is called the First Amendment to the Constitution. My hope in being here tonight is to bring the school committee's attention to this issue. I hope that you will speak up for the rest of us so we can express ourselves without being pulled out of class. Next time it may not only be me, there might be more students that decide to speak out. Thank you for your time and good night.
All right. So again, good on this kid for speaking up for himself. That was brave. And it's good experience for the future for him to learn to stand up and give a speech or stand up and talk to people who have more power than he does and express his opinions. I am not criticizing him for that. I think that's amazing. There's plenty of 12-year-olds who wouldn't have that kind of guts. What I am criticizing is the response. The response by his father and the response by the school administration, who apparently did not do a good job of explaining what the problem was. What's Candace's reaction?
Just such an incredible speech, so well written. He's delivering it in a very good manner. And here's the reality: if you are a child and you follow the rules, if you are a child and you believe in reality, you now can face consequences at school.
He didn't follow the rules, and I'll show that to you in a moment. I took it upon myself to find out what those rules were. Candace, you're wrong. He was not following the rules.
Right? Because they are so worried about accepting mental illness that they're starting to punish people who don't have it. I like that he points to the fact that people are allowed to fly their pride parades. That is their belief. Maybe this young boy is
Fly their pride parades? I mean, that was a slip of the tongue, but it's a funny thought. I'm imagining a parade, somebody waving a parade around. It's a very strange image.
Christian. Is he allowed to say that he finds it to be disruptive to his learning environment when he sees somebody wearing a pride flag? Absolutely not. They would tell him that this is a protected space. The truth is that they're willing to protect every strange mentally ill group, but they will not protect people who believe in reality. That's it.
So there's a lot going on here. But the main issue is inclusion versus exclusion. She's saying that he should be allowed to be exclusionary because other people are allowed to be inclusionary. There's tolerance, meaning all people are accepted, and there's quote-unquote tolerance that says you should accept my view over yours. Or my view, which says that you are, as a person, invalid, is as acceptable as your view, which says all people are valid. Tolerance, and I said this in the last video too, to be tolerant, you don't have to tolerate intolerance. And a white Christian male is the least oppressed person in this country. And not being allowed to express views that support oppression of other groups is not oppression. Supporting LGBTQ rights does not oppress anyone else.
It's the truth. That is the entire circumstance in America, that if there's nothing wrong with you, you are somebody that is a threat to everybody else.
So if nothing's wrong with you, that means you're a white Christian male, Candace? Because you are neither white nor male. I want you to consider that. And you're certainly entitled to follow whatever political and ideological position that appeals to you. That's entirely up to you. As the boy pointed out, We have a right to free speech according to the First Amendment of the Constitution. However, you have basically just said straight out that the only normal people are white Christian males and that anyone else is mentally ill. Being trans, being gay, being bi, none of those things are mental illnesses. And being one of those things doesn't mean that you're abnormal. And by saying that, you're basically illustrating the entire problem with this boy's shirt, and you don't even see it.
And we are living in a live insane asylum. I love that he talks about how there's disruptions of people, fist fights, people that are arguing, people that are talking in class.
He didn't say anything about fist fights or arguing in class.
And nobody cares. He has to sort of deal with that circumstance day in and day out. And yet he wore a shirt, a basic fact. In fact, he shouldn't have had to wear it. He should have been learning it in school.
I'm going to get back to you on this, Candace, but it is not a fact. It never has been a fact. For decades, it has not been a fact.
He should have been learning in school that you're sending him to, if the school is basing itself in reality, if it's basing its lessons in reality. These are things that he shouldn't have had to wear, but that should have been being taught. I worry about what it is that children are learning now in schools. I think.
Are they learning tolerance, acceptance, exposure to people different from them? That sounds terrible. Gosh.
I think the overarching theme is that your feelings matter more than the facts. And
facts don't care about your feelings.
And him being sent home is an absolute atrocity.
He was not sent home. His father picked him up.
I'm proud that his father supported him. It's the number one thing that I encourage to my listeners. If you are a parent to a young child that is in the school, you need to be their partner and you need to be their greatest defender. It is the only way that we get to combat this lunacy. So kudos to his father for supporting him and then taking it a step further to make sure that what happened to this young boy was heard by the entire school board in Massachusetts.
She's not wrong that parents should support their children. Research has shown that, for example, trans students who have the support of their families are far less likely to suffer from suicidal ideation and other forms of mental illness. Supporting your children is very important. However, at the same time, it's the parents like that who are teaching their children to be exclusionary and intolerant that are the problem. That's why I say I don't blame the boy. Obviously, he's learning this at home. And it comes from the fact that the parents were not exposed to these kind of different points of view, people who are different from them. The first thing I want to do is I made an effort to find an actual news article about this event, and the only groups that were reporting on it were very conservative or far-right news outlets. It wasn't in any of the mainstream news. But here's an article I found that we'll look at quickly. I don't even know what FISM TV is, but it seemed to have the best summary of what happened. So it says, 7th grader sent home for "There Are Only Two Genders" shirt brings up issue at school board meeting, which is what we saw. So a Massachusetts middle school student who says he was removed from school for wearing a shirt that read "There are only two genders" brought the matter before the Middleborough Public Schools Committee meeting last month. And it quotes from the speech and gives his name, which may or may not be. I assume that the parents gave permission for that. So we know what school he went to, and that makes it easy. It says he was taken out of gym class for what turned out to be a very uncomfortable talk. I was told my shirt was targeting a protected class. It's mostly just quoting from his speech. But the reason that I wanted to find reporting about it is I was very curious to clarify whether he was sent home or taken home, because he said his father came to pick him up. So I decided, let's go to the source. What does the Nichols Middle School in Middleborough, Massachusetts dress code, here it is, Nichols Middle School in Middleborough, Massachusetts, what does it say in their dress code about what's acceptable to wear to school? So, here is the John T. Nichols Jr. Middle School Student Family Handbook for 2022 to 2023. And if we find the dress code, which is somewhere down here. Code of conduct, dress code, page 44. So we'll jump down to the dress code, which comes, incidentally, directly after discrimination, which I think we should look at as well. Chapter 622 of the Massachusetts General Laws, an act prohibiting discrimination in school, reads as follows. No person shall be excluded from or discriminated against admission to a public school of any town or in obtaining the advantages, privileges, and courses of study of such public school on account of race, color, national origin, age, sex, religion, gender identity, or sexual orientation, homelessness, or disability. I emphasized gender identity and sexual orientation because not every state has that, but Massachusetts does. So, the dress code is governed by health, safety, and appropriateness. We encourage students to dress in a neat and presentable manner that reflects pride in themselves and their school. School is a workplace, and an environment conducive to learning is necessary. Clothing that is too revealing causes distractions and inhibits learning. Clothing that is too revealing causes distractions and inhibits learning is not allowed. That is not a good sentence. Guys, do better. We expect all students to conform to the following. Excessively revealing, pajamas, blah, blah, blah. This is all pretty standard. There is a discussion to be had about the language in school dress codes. This is not that point. Clothing with alcohol, tobacco, vulgar writing, sexual references, or controlled substance references. So there are things you're not allowed to wear. Clothing must not state, imply, or depict hate speech or imagery that targets groups based on race, ethnicity, gender, sexual orientation, gender identity, religious affiliation, or any other classification. Any other apparel that the administration determines to be unacceptable to our community standards will not be allowed. If students wear something inappropriate to school, they will be asked to call their parent or guardian to request that more appropriate attire be brought to school. Repeated violations of the dress code will result in disciplinary action. So this suggests to me that, as with most schools, if you wear something that violates the dress code, you'll be asked to change. Not that you will be expelled or sent home or given detention or suspended or any of those things that you might be imagining. All they did was ask him to change his shirt. Probably just putting on a hoodie over it, since it was March and it was probably cold anyway, would have been fine. The point was that the words written on his t-shirt were discriminatory against people's gender, sexual orientation, or gender identity. By saying there are only two genders, you are stating straight out that non-binary people do not exist, that gender fluid people do not exist, and by extension, that being trans is somehow unnatural. And that is exclusionary to a group of people based on their gender, sexual orientation, or gender identity, which is against school policy. So I wanted to point that out first. Now, he talked about other disruptions in his classroom and things not being done about that. So I was curious about the school itself. So I looked that one up. And here is that school on the U.S. News and World Report rankings. It is not, it's sort of middling in terms of performance. 51% male, 49% female, 747 kids. It's a fairly small school. It's the only middle school in Middleborough, which is a fringe rural setting. As far as I could tell, it's the only middle school in the district, so it's a fairly small district as well. And it does look like, it's middling. So there's nothing really wrong with the school, but there's nothing exemplary about it. One thing I will point out is minority enrollment is only 13%. It is a very, very white district, and as fringe rural, there's a good chance that it is more politically conservative, as that tends to be what happens. Now, it is Massachusetts, which is one of the most liberal states in the country, but that's more in the cities than in the rural regions, as is true of most of New England. So it's not this kid's fault, the environment that he's growing up in, the environment of the school he's in. However, the school has policies in place to be inclusionary. And that's what's important to this story. I don't doubt that there are disruptions in the classroom. That happens in every school. And I also doubt that nothing is done about it. But I don't know. I don't know this school personally. I don't know anyone who goes to this school. All I'm going on is what I know about middle schools in general and what I can see from this report about this particular school. It's a pretty small school as middle schools go, public middle schools. Okay. So now that we've gotten the story let's talk about the First Amendment. Okay, so here's the ACLU website about public school students' rights. It says the Supreme Court ruled in 1969 that students do not shed their constitutional rights to freedom of speech or expression at the schoolhouse gate. This was, I believe, based on a case about students wearing anti-war protesting apparel and so forth in school, and it brought up how much control schools should have over students' freedom of speech and expression. So, you have the right to speak out, hand out flyers and petitions, and wear expressive clothing in school as long as you don't disrupt the functioning of the school or violate school policies that don't hinge on the message expressed. So, since there is an anti-discrimination policy at the school, which is legal, they are allowed to tell you you can't wear a shirt that is discriminatory. What counts as disruptive will vary by context, but a school disagreeing with your position or thinking your speech is controversial or in bad taste is not enough to qualify. Courts have upheld students' rights to wear things like an anti-war armband, an armband opposing the right to get an abortion, and a shirt supporting the LGBTQ community. Schools can have rules that have nothing to do with the message expressed, like dress codes, but that has to apply across the board. So the kid might have an argument here. He certainly has every right to wear that shirt outside of school. He might have an argument that says they can't tell me I can't wear this shirt because it excludes certain types of speech and not others. However, because of Massachusetts anti-discrimination laws, if that shirt is considered discriminatory against a certain protected class, that may trump his First Amendment right in this case. It's an interesting question, and I suspect in our current environment, our current Supreme Court might uphold this kid's claim if it got that far. However, I wonder if they would hold the same opinion if the kid wore a shirt that was, for example, anti-Semitic or pro-Nazi or more explicitly hateful. And it's an interesting question, and I don't have an answer to that question, but I invite you to consider it. Let me know what you think in the comments. Does this child have a First Amendment right to wear that shirt at school? And what should be the appropriate response to it? I would advocate for education. I would advocate for bringing the kid in and saying, look, we can't stop you from wearing this shirt. You have the First Amendment right to express your opinion. But I would like you to understand what your shirt means and why it is upsetting to some of the other students, in the interests of supporting people of all genders and sexual orientation and other marginalized groups in our school. We'd ask that you consider the impact that your words have on them. Now, Candace Owens, in her commentary, made it a point to speak a lot about how the schools should be teaching reality, and she's worried about what the schools are teaching. They should be teaching that what the kid's shirt said is true, that there are only two genders. And that's the next piece of commentary I would like to offer. Many people who argue this point of view, that biology says there are only two genders, biology says there are only two sexes, this is science, you can't dispute science, that opinion is wrong. That statement is wrong. They are leading on their middle school or maybe, high school biology lessons that says, you get an X gene from your mother and you get an X or a Y from your father. And if you're XX, you're a girl. And if you're XY, you're a boy. And that's it. Some may say it depends on your genitals. If you've got one set of genitals, you're a boy. If you've got the other set of genitals, you're a girl. And therefore, sex is binary. There are two sexes. Gender is the same as sex. There are only two genders. We're done here. That's what science says. But they're wrong. Science does not say that and has not said that for decades. So what I wanted to do to finish out this video is show you some clips from a video by a biology teacher named Forrest Valkai, who I have mentioned before on this channel, explaining why Candace Owens is wrong.
The thing that you have to understand about biology is that all we're trying to do is define and calculate what nature is already doing all on its own. Life makes all the rules and breaks all the rules all the time. So as biologists, our job is to try to just carve out a hole for the peg that nature has already given us. And not everybody's going to fit into that slot.
By the way, I highly recommend watching this entire video, and it will be linked in the description below, but I wanted to show you some relevant clips. So his first point is, science attempts to create definitions for things that already exist, and basically nothing fits perfectly into any definition science can create. It doesn't just have to do with gender, it has to do with how we define a species, how we define a mammal, how we define life. So by saying that science has a concrete idea about anything means you don't understand science. So that's his first point. The next point, we're going to talk directly about XX and XY.
I know what you're thinking, right? You're thinking, hey, just look at the chromosomes. After all, you're either XX or XY, right? Not exactly. The concept of how sex is determined in an organism is usually broken down like this. You have your chromosomes, those code for what kind of gonads you get, either ovaries or testes, and then those produce germ cells and hormones, and that's how we tell whether you're a boy or a girl. And if you go to any high school level biology class, that's probably the explanation that you're going to get. Problem is, that's wildly inaccurate.
He says, this is what you learned in high school biology, and it is wildly inaccurate. So as I said, Candace and others like her are basing their entire knowledge of science on what they learned in high school. And as with many things we learned in high school, that is an introductory level of information. One example that I thought up as far as how what you learn in high school is hardly in depth is what caused World War I. What I remember learning in high school about what caused World War I is Archduke Ferdinand was parading through the streets of Sarajevo, and Gavrilo Princip assassinated him, and World War I started. Which is true. But it's not the whole story. By far. We didn't really learn very much about Princip's political views, why he and his group wanted to assassinate the Archduke, who this Archduke was, even what he was Archduke of, and why it mattered. World War I started because of nationalism, because of the Serbians wanting to break away from the Austro-Hungarian Empire. We didn't learn very much about that in high school. And when I did finally decide to find out on my own why it was important that this dude assassinated this other dude, I was like, oh! Now I understand why this kicked off a big old war. You have to understand all the things that led up to that point, all the other things that were going on in Europe at the time, all the other wars that had just happened or were ongoing at the time, to understand why this event kicked off a world war. So, like the surface level stuff we learned in high school history, the stuff you learn in 9th grade biology class is surface level. It's basics. It gives you a foundation on which to build. But if you don't go on to build on that foundation, you cannot claim to be an expert. All right, finally, I'm going to play a fairly long segment where he explains just how complicated sex and gender expression are.
What kind of gonads you get, whether it's one or the other or neither or both, comes down to an incredibly complex set of genetic interactions on several different chromosomes, a few of which aren't even your sex chromosomes. For example, the gene that builds testes is called SOX9, and it's on chromosome number 17, which everyone watching this has. If you have ovaries right now, that's because on your X chromosome you have another gene called NR0B1, which makes a protein called DAX1 that stops SOX9 from giving you testes. But I have an X chromosome too, right? So what's going on there? The SRY gene that we've been talking about works by producing a protein that binds to NR0B1 and stops it from making DAX1 so that SOX9 can give me testes. That's why I have testicles. It's because a gene made a protein that stopped another gene from making a different protein that would have otherwise stopped a different gene from giving me the testicles that I have. If you're paying attention, you might be starting to notice a few things here. This means that you could have a totally perfectly functional Y chromosome, but you have a problem with your SOX9 gene, and so you still end up with ovaries. Or this could mean that you have no Y chromosome at all, but you have a faulty NR0B1 gene, and so you still end up with testicles. And yes, there are other animals, even other mammals, that don't have an SRY gene, that don't have an NR0B1 gene, that are still dioecious and still have sex differentiation. And there are even other animals that have all the same chromosomes and all the same genes we have, but then they have other genes on top of that, so the whole switch from male to male back to female again is even more complicated. Let's ignore all that. Let's say that you have all the right chromosomes and you have all the right genes in all the right places. None of that really matters, because it's the hormones that your gonads produce that actually make your body look and act male or female. All the way back in like the early 1930s, scientists were noticing that female hormones introduced into male rats were producing some decidedly male behaviors, and that similarly, male hormones introduced into female rats were making them like weirdly more female. Even though we've been studying this stuff for like 100 years now, a lot of people are still very surprised to find that we all have testosterone and estrogen and all the other sex hormones in our body at all times, and they don't usually do what a lot of people think they do. Let me give you just a grossly oversimplified explanation of how this works. You see, the cholesterol in your body is converted into progesterone, and then that is what becomes testosterone, and that is what gives you what my anatomy professors would call male internal plumbing. Some testosterone is converted into dihydrous testosterone, and that's what gives you male external genitalia. Some other testosterone is then converted into estrogen and estradiol, and that's where you get female secondary sex characteristics and get this, male brain anatomy. That's right, female embryos have to produce special proteins to bind estrogen to stop it from getting to their brains, otherwise they would develop mentally like a boy. We'll talk more about that stuff later. So every person has all of these hormones at different levels in their body all the time. Your exact hormone levels are as unique as your fingerprints. It's also important to note that hormones don't actually do anything. All they're able to do is bind to receptors on your cells, and then that makes the cells do the things that make you into a male or a female. And guess what? The production of those cell receptors is controlled by a totally different gene pathway. So for example, you could have a daughter who still hasn't had her period by like 16. So you take her to the doctor to figure out what's going on, and you find out that your daughter is actually your son who has androgen insensitivity syndrome. So their cells aren't producing the receptors to bind testosterone. So even though they've got enough testosterone in their body to give them freaking antlers and a mane, they still look and feel like a girl.
There's more. There's a lot more. But I think you get the point. There aren't just XX and XY. Sex and gender are determined by a lot more than just your chromosomes, or just your gonads, or just your gametes, or just your genitals. And this boy's shirt was blatantly false. So if Candace is so worried about what this boy is being taught in school and that he should be taught reality and he should be taught facts, then absolutely 100% he should be called in to be told why his shirt is factually incorrect. And I think that the school is maybe not making as good an effort as they could to teach that, but I also think that it's a very complicated subject, and simply letting people in middle school know that gender isn't as simple as there are two of them and they are male and female is enough of a jumping off point. And if that piques their interest and they want to learn more, YouTube has their back. And hopefully they will learn more in the future on that topic as they mature enough for their brains to handle the kind of abstraction necessary to understand this kind of complication. So there was a lot going on in this story. First of all was the dishonest reporting. Boy kicked out of school for what his shirt said. That is not true. He was asked to change. He refused to change. His father took him home. 2, that he needs to be taught facts and that his shirt was simply stating facts. That's not true. I just showed that. And 3, he has a First Amendment right to wear a shirt that expresses his opinion. And that's where things get fuzzy. I will admit he might have a point. However, as things stand, the school has a dress code policy that prohibits hate speech against people based on their gender, sexual orientation, or gender identity. And unless and until he decides to sue the school over its dress code policy and sue the state of Massachusetts over its law about gender discrimination and gender identity discrimination, and take that all the way to the Supreme Court and have the Supreme Court hand down a new ruling on what kind of First Amendment rights you have in school based on what you wear, he needs to follow the school rules. And the school rules are that the shirt he was wearing was discriminatory, and therefore he needed to change his shirt. He can wear that shirt every Saturday and every Sunday of the rest of his life if he wants to. He can wear it when he gets home from school. He can wear it before he goes to school. He can wear it to bed. He can wear it on a train, on a bus, on an airplane. He can wear it at rest stops and in the mall. He just can't wear it to school. So, good on you for standing up for your beliefs. Congratulations for being brave enough to go before the school board to express your opinion. That is all highly encouraged. That is what this country is built on. That is what the First Amendment is for. But I don't agree with your opinion, and your opinion is not based on facts. And that is something that you do need to learn. I think the most important things that children can learn by going to public school, especially a more diverse public school, is that there are people out there that are not like them, and that those are still people, and they deserve respect, and they deserve support, and they deserve to be validated. And that is something this boy needs to learn, and hopefully he will, and hopefully he will grow up to help make this world a more tolerant and inclusive place. All right, humans, thank you so much for joining me today. I hope you learned something. I'll see you another time for more commentary and reaction. Until then, take care of yourselves, have a bath and a nap, and I'll see you next time.